The following presentation was made possible by the Alltech Media Group, a Southern California multimedia company providing exponential branding and marketing services to all their clients. The Alltech Media Group understands the value of the 3W strategy, providing their clients proven, trackable results. Let us make it easy for you to grow your business. Visit alltechmedia.com.
Hello, I'm Marr Brown, and I want to welcome you to SoCal CEO Magazine. Today we'll be featuring business owner and consultant Ray Anderson. For 30 years, Ray has been helping small business leaders get their people right in order to get their business right. In 1993, he founded Anderson Business Coaching, or ABC, around the concept of a no-collar workforce. In addition to speaking with Ray, later in the show, we will sit down with one of Ray's clients to get a first-hand account of the benefits of working with Ray and the ABC team. Ray, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Mark.
You know, Ray, I want to get started by having you briefly describe your background and how you got into business coaching.
Well, I'm a Vietnam vet, and so in 1967 I had the pleasure of taking a little vacation over in Vietnam, so that affected me in both a positive and negative way. You know, it's one of those things where I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it was a good thing for me. And what I learned very quickly, I was with the 82nd Airborne, and I was a reporter. And I learned very quickly that the soldiers I worked for, went with, understood that a good leader they would take a bullet for, and a bad leader they would reserve a bullet for. So it began to, teach me things about leadership that I thought were important. And then I came back after Vietnam, finished my degree, went and did some reporting and some other things, and ended up being a laborer in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, in which I again learned more about leadership and how leaders have a huge impact on frontline workers, and sometimes they don't understand that. So it kind of made me begin to question, why is it some people do well though they have a lot of potential and others don't? And is it leadership, or how can it be changed? So that's kind of what started my interest in it, and I moved from there. So.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, and we could translate your Vietnam experience in terms of some people wanting to reserve a bullet or take a bullet for their leader. In the workforce, we call that some employees would, jump through hoops for their managers, and others try to get them fired. Right. What are some things that you saw as the difference between the two types of individuals as it related to their leaders? What
we found is that good-hearted leaders had a capacity for being able to draw out the best in people. And, so to me, that's, culture is really, really important, and we've drawn from John King, who wrote a book called Tribal Leadership, in which he talks about culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so, we always try to contrast strategy, which is transactional, and all the systems that are required to make something work. But culture is transformational, and if you don't have people engaged, they become toxic. And so a good leader understands how to do that, and it's difficult to make that work, but that's the challenge that we face, and that's what we try to do.
Well, and looking at your background and your bio, I read something that was very interesting, a concept called the no-collar workforce. I've heard of white collar, I've heard of blue collar, but I've never heard of a no-collar workforce. And can you describe what that is?
People who are working for somebody because they have to have a very different attitude than people who work for somebody because they want to. And the no-collar was the idea of freeing people, unleashing them, letting them go where their passions take them, and then using that in some way to be able to build a business or a church or a nonprofit or whatever. It's all about engaging people. And so we know clearly that good leaders are able to engage people on intangibles. I have a dream. John Kennedy saying, we will put a man on the moon. Well, those are the sorts of things that really engage people. And so what we found is that when you have a no-collar workforce, everybody's unleashed to their passion, but it's for a purpose that's related to the company or the organization, and that's what the no-collar came from.
I think that's a very interesting concept. And what are some of the challenges that you face in trying to implement that, not only with leadership in companies, but also with employees, because that's different than the way business has been done in the past?
Well, and the biggest challenge is that many executives see this as kumbaya. Hey, we don't need any of this touchy-feely. We got things to do here. And what I try to tell them is that You know, a person who is engaged and has no collar on them is more likely to accomplish the results and the goals that they want than somebody who's sitting there saying whatever. And so how do we put that together? And I go back to that notion, strategy are the bricks of an organization. It's all the systems in place, et cetera, that make something happen from A to Z, which gets it to the client. Culture, though, can prevent that. As I said, you know, John King pointed out, culture can destroy strategy. So how do you build that connection? What I find is that most organizations do not have a good communication structure that removes what I call information clots.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that somewhere along the organization there is a spot in there where a supervisor or somebody else will hold information because he can, and he wants to be able to control it. And wherever that point is, that means the leader is no longer getting access to information that would help him achieve his goals. If you have a good communication structure which has checks and balances to make sure that doesn't happen, you have a good system that works. But most people don't see that as important as the business elements. And to me, it's even more important. And when I find good people, good leaders say, yes, I understand that. So it's transactional in that we have to have a system to make it work, and it's cultural in that it engages people.
Excellent. You know, we don't have enough time to really dive into your entire program, but I find what you're saying very fascinating. And I think from a business perspective, I think of elements of fear in terms of open communication, politics in business in terms of preventing the flow of information. So give me a couple of ways that you would go in and break down fear, you know, get through politics and implement your strategy of really the importance of culture over pure strategy.
I had a very significant mentor who was a senior VP of HR at Nokia. His name was Jussi Hokonen. And Jussi quickly understood back in the early 90s when they were struggling to survive, the CEO said, look, we have to connect with the front line. And he literally, when they were in the midst of a bankruptcy, went to all the front line at the different plants and said, look, without your help, we're never going to get this. I'm going to give you access to information that is confidential and could destroy us. But I'm going to trust you to use it to help us grow. Well, from that point until 2000, that grew from 2% to 33% of the marketplace. And so a lot of the principles that were floating around in my head, Jussi had articulated and actually implemented at Nokia. So I was able then to be able to draw from him and say, okay, how would we do this inside of organizations? How do we get executives to get out of the groupthink and feeling like I've had broken promises, broken dreams, and broken things happen to me, and I don't trust my employees. On the other hand, you have employees saying, I don't trust them. And so we have this us and them, and the way in which we break that down is we bring them back together and start asking them to engage with us. And so we have a system that helps us do that on a simple, straightforward basis. It begins with an assessment, an anonymous assessment, because I've learned you can't get to where you want to go unless you know where you are. And most organizations never take the time to find out what that is. And we have this powerful tool based on best practices that enables you to get access to employee information anonymously that gives you insights that otherwise you wouldn't get.
And I would imagine that assessment, is that the main tool you use to sort of when you first start working with a client to understand where the client is at that point in time?
And we know from being lost, the first thing we ask people is, where are you? And in a business where you have all this fog, it's much more difficult to do. So we found this tool, which was based on best practices, developed by a couple of guys 15 years ago, is the most powerful tool I've seen to be able to get that information. On the individual side, we frequently use what we call the DISC to be able to identify people's differences in styles. And many times I see the information clots related to people who don't like their other person's style. And my experience has been that what you find is that it's the differences in the organization between people that make it strong, not the similarities. And that's what Jussi discovered. He's found that when he had people with different skill sets and they were able to work together, engaged on a single point of interest, which Nokia needed, they did a lot more than if they started focusing on individual differences and saying, well, I don't like you because you don't think like I do. So those are the two tools we use, the organizational assessment and the DISC, to kind of help people get a clearer picture as to where they are, so then they can go to where they want to go instead of struggling in the fog.
It makes a lot of sense. I think from a perspective standpoint, I think as a business coach or consultant, one of the things I think is important is to be able to say that you've lived the life that you're discussing and talking about and coaching on, and it sounds like you've done that. And then how have you brought the frontline worker together with the C-level executive or the CEO, and just give me an example of the power of doing that?
I have a client right now in El Monte, and it's interesting. When we first started there was a lot of fear, as you pointed out. People didn't want to say anything. There had been some supervisors who were clouding information for their own purposes, and that's the struggle as you work inside of an organization. People will, try to meet their selfish needs first, and if you can get them to understand it's in their best interest to move it forward, that changes. In this particular context, a supervisor, a woman supervisor I might add, who had declared to everybody, I am not interested in any further move in this organization, I'm going to stay right here. Once we removed the fear barriers, once she understood that she was being asked to improve things, once she understood that, she transformed her own behavior in relationship to her boss, to her subordinates, and within a matter of 6 months they transformed the manufacturing floor because they could. And it was always there, they just hadn't been free to do it.
Okay, excellent. And speaking of leadership, I know there's an interesting program that's based on the 5 principles that I read about. And can you speak to the importance of leadership engaging in this process?
And here's the struggle that I see. I've watched executives now for 30 years, and with the challenges of the information clouds, no matter who it is, the leader, like yourself, is the king. And regardless of style, people always want to tell the leader what they think he wants to hear. The leader, in turn, is trying to go out there and make decisions that could either grow the organization or kill it. And yet, many times, he's getting just partial information, just like the front line's getting partial information because of fear. Okay. So what happens is that they make decisions that are wrong for the organization because they weren't given the right information. And what happens, there comes this point in which we have groupthink. And all of a sudden they're saying, well, I can't trust my employees, I got a fraudulent claim, I had this happen. And so we paint the same brush over every employee and all of them become fearful. And so if we can just eliminate that and change our mindset and say, look, the goal here is to see how many people we engage. So part of what we do is develop systems to get the right people in. Because if you have the wrong people in, they become toxic themselves and reinforce that negative, those information clots. And the reason I use that is we all know a heart attack is some point in your body where the information or blood no longer flows. Right. It's the same thing in a business. So you have to have some way to be able to make that work. And the executive in particular needs access to honest, truthful information.
Makes a lot of sense. And and you mentioned getting the right people in organizations. And the flip side is getting the wrong people. And I don't like to say out of organizations because sometimes it's just not the right fit. Right. And so sometimes it's not a matter of an organization having the wrong person, it's the wrong environment for that employee to prosper. So how do you work with customers in terms of identifying the right fit to bring in, and then the individuals that need to maybe find a different opportunity that's better for them?
That's a very good point. I think what I see happening is that I've had executives tell me, well, I don't want to invest in training because if I do, the people will just leave anyway. And so I'll say, well, how's ignorance working for you? But more to the point, when you have large information blocks, first of all, it creates fear. Good people will leave because they'll look for a better opportunity, one that better utilizes their skill sets. Mediocre people will stay. And so you now have a double whammy. The people that could really help you have left, and the people who no longer care are there. And so that's one of the challenges that we try to help people understand, is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They keep trying to move forward, but they keep getting deeper and deeper into clots.
I know that you have 5 principles, and I'd like you to briefly kind of, as I say each principle, tell me briefly what each one means in terms of the no-collar transformation process. The first one is a shared vision. Right,
and I'll go back to that speech by John Kennedy in 1963, and he said, we will put a man on the moon by the at the end of the decade. Now as they look back there were a million other things they didn't know, right. But they were able to do it. And so the point is, when you engage a worker with the same vision, it transforms things. And the example I give you from a client, we had a PVC manufacturer that, these are frontline workers who are literally making PVC pipe, stacking it, making PVC pipe, stacking it. And for the most part, they had no concept of whether this is good, bad, or indifferent. When we explained to them that the pipe that they were making was being used for the information superhighway, and the reason it was different colors is that it had to go in the ground in LA mauve, and it had to come out of the ground in New York mauve to make sure it was the right lines. And that was a transformative moment for them, because they thought, I'm not doing anything, and their kids had computers, and they're going home, we're making the information superhighway. That's the engagement, that's the vision. And in that particular company, in a matter of 18 months, we brought them from the 6th worst company in their network to #1.
Wow.
I mean, that's transformative. And it was a woman who was leading that organization who really understood the relational side that was driving performance.
Excellent. What about relevant skills as the second principle?
Relevant skills, I think, this is really amazing, and I just had an experience recently with our assessment tool. We had executives in the cultural side. They're asked to assess 6 areas, including training and development, values, and management modeling. And in their case, they said the most important thing was values, walking your talk, which made a lot of sense. And training and development was on the back end, because they said, well, we've trained everybody. They all know. We went to the front line, and it was the inverse. Everybody in the front line said, we need more training and development. And for the executives, they were shocked, like, well, what do we need to train them? And the point is that my experience in America, the training that we do is typically, Jamar, you're going to be starting your job. Glad to have you here today. I'm going to give you an hour of training, and then they're going to kick your butt and tell you to get out there. And that sadly is how most training is done. So part of what we want to do is ask them, what are your challenges? What are the things that are not working for you? How can we help you? And what we don't do in America is that we don't take suggestions seriously. We just take them, and then they drop. And so what happens, employers find their suggestion box filled with obscene notes and gum wrappers and all sorts of things because nobody implements, and they go back into whatever.
Right.
So part of our job is to create that link in which, even if you can't implement a suggestion, you have to give the person feedback on why.
What about, and this is something that I think the viewers will be interested in, meaningful incentives and standards.
And here, the research over and over shows that, if you ask employees to rate the number 1, 2 through 10 items, pay is typically 5th or 6th. Respect, recognition, challenge are always much higher. So when you remove those, it always becomes a red herring. I'm leaving because I could get paid more. But the truth of the matter is, nobody listened to me. I never got thanked for the things I did here. And so some of this is so rudimentary simple about human relationships that in the hubbub of day-to-day activity, people forget about. These are people, And that's why we believe high tech is good systems, and high touch is how do you engage the person so to make them feel important. And because they are. Today in this economy, you need everybody in there. And if you didn't, they wouldn't be there. But if they're only participating, at a minor level, it hurts you. Many of them come in, frontline workers, they punch in the clock and they turn off their brain. And when they leave, they punch out and they turn their brain back on. Think of the waste in terms of human potential and what somebody could do when all that gray matter is just going to waste.
What about, especially in an environment of limited resources, I see that you have appropriate resources as one of the pillars. It seems challenging to do that. Can you explain how you work with companies to apply appropriate resources in an environment of less and less resources?
Well, and I think, part of what we try to do with executives is realize, you don't have to hire somebody full-time. You can outsource a lot of things. There's lots of different ways, but we get stuck in our thinking. Our belief sets are, well, I have to hire somebody. Well, maybe you don't. More importantly, when you get to the front line, we were in an organization which had a big sign on the wall that said cleanliness is important to our safety, et cetera. And this place was an absolute mess. And I said, I don't get it. What's this up here? And he says, we don't have a broom. Now, this was an exception, but clearly many times they're asking for resources and asking for help, and nobody's listening. Computers run slow. They're spending an hour a day waiting for a computer to boot up. That's an enormous waste of both resource, time, and frustration. So those are examples.
Very good point. And then lastly, we touched on this earlier, fearless feedback.
Fearless feedback, and the challenge that I see is that here we are in the world's most successful democracy, and yet businesses are the last bastion of the fiefdom, which is a medieval concept. I am the king, and I'll do what I want, and you'll have to do it because I say so. And so the fearless feedback comes back where they are trying to move forward with something and they're finding that they've been stifled, that they've been told by a supervisor that nobody's listening, and so they stop sharing information. And at that point, you're having that same heart attack effect, but inside the organization. So we have to open the doors on that, and sometimes it takes time. As I was telling you about this lady, because of a bad experience with her supervisor in the past, it took her almost 6 months to come around. But once she came around, it was an enormous change.
Okay. Ray, this has been a really fascinating discussion, and we're going to continue right after a short break.
The following presentation was made possible by the Alltech Media Group, a Southern California multimedia company providing exponential branding and marketing services to all their clients. The Alltech Media Group understands the value of the 3W strategy, providing their clients proven, trackable results. Let us make it easy for you to grow your business. Visit alltechmedia.com.
Welcome back to SoCal CEO. We are speaking with Ray Anderson, President of Anderson Business Coaching. As promised, joining us now are two of Ray's clients here to share a little bit about their experience with Ray and his company. I would like to welcome Judy Lopez, President of Microdyne Plastics, and Ray Blum, who's the COO of the Corporate Advocate. Judy and Ray, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
And it's always a pleasure to be able to speak to clients that have actually worked with the COOs or CEOs of companies that that provide consulting. Tell me about some of the key challenges that your company was facing that made you want to seek help from a business coach.
Well, being a California-based company, as you know, there's a lot of challenges that evolve. And we've been in business since 1975, and the face of industry has really changed quite a bit. We're plastics manufacturers, and a lot of manufacturing has gone global. And then you have kind of the family element, which, most businesses are family owned, as we know, quite a few in the United States at least. And it had its own challenges. You've got family, in-laws, outlaws, you name it. so we're just it's its own entity, I guess. Its own, I just think of it kind of like its own little nucleus. And so, getting to know your team is really important as well. So he brought that emphasis. Getting to know the individuals and what it takes to make a successful,
Good. And then Ray, before we go over to Ray Blum, we have two Rays on the show, which is great. Before we go to Ray, just speak to what Judy was just saying in terms of when you first went in. There's different dynamics. There's a family-owned business, it's a small business, it's a growing business, a lot of potential. How did you first go in and assess, what to do?
Well, we use the same tool that I spoke of earlier, and one of the advantages is that her father was still running the business, and he's still a part of it. And my hope was to take some of the siblings, and Judy and Tracy were the two that stepped up and indicated they wanted to make some changes. And so with Judy, we were grooming her to be president, and she's ultimately done that. And it's been a journey. I mean, it wasn't something that happened overnight. And her sister Tracy, who was in HR, was not really following her own passion at the time. And what we were able to do with Tracy is get her to realize that she could kind of explore some of the things that she wanted to do when she was younger, and she's very creative, and she's moved into marketing, and now she's got a marketing certificate, and she's actively involved in both the sales and the marketing. It's been transformative for her. As a consequence. It's the thing I was talking about, and this is a family dynamic which is equally difficult as some of the employee relationships I was talking about.
Makes sense. And then Ray, from your perspective, what were some of the things that, because I know that you kind of oversee a few different entities and organizations, and so it's a different dynamic. Tell me, what are some of the challenges that you were faced with that made you want to seek help from a business coach?
Yeah, when we first engaged Ray, we had recreated ourselves about 2008, and we expanded our offerings to 3 different divisions, and we grew from about 5 employees to about 20 employees. And at the time, our growth was great. Financially, we had found something that worked for the company. We were growing, we were successful. But in that growth process, we also disconnected, I think, from some of our frontline workers and listening to them. We got into the execution of the plan and got away from listening to some of our employees and sitting down with them a little bit. So in engaging Ray, I think it it wasn't anything that was learned for the first time, but it was refocusing on really what drives our business, which is our people.
You know, you said something very interesting. That is, a lot of times, the financial success of a company may mask or may, you know, make the company feel like everything's great. You know, it's if we're making money, we're fine. How did you, you know, say, well, we're making money, doing well, but?
Well, and again, I think we did all right listening to our employees, and we would have meetings where we would talk a lot. In the process of working with Ray and through his organization, we started listening as much as we talked. We listened to the feedback from the assessments that he did. And one of the things that came up from our employees was customer service.
Okay.
So in our growth, they felt like our customer service had suffered. And so as a team effort, we focused on that customer service, and I think today we're much better for that.
Interesting.
And our clients would attest to that as well.
Great, great. And you know, Ray, just, speak to, you know, kind of going in initially and uncovering, you know, through the assessment, you know, kind of the key thing is that you needed to start doing in the organization.
Well, with the, you know, and the neat thing about the tool is that the tool drives us, not me. And you know, and it's really helpful to have input from everybody anonymously. It breaks down a lot of barriers because people feel, one, they're being listened to. Second, is it asks some difficult questions, and it's humbling because you know, most of the CEOs give themselves very low scores because they realize, oh, I don't know this, I don't know that. And for the front line, it gives them an opportunity to really give some input. And in both these cases, and Ray's in particular, you know, I had known both he and the president of the organization for a long time, and it was clear that they have an interest in engaging both their clients and their employees, and this was a way to be able to do that they hadn't been able to access before. And again, it's, you know, I don't care how nice a leader is, he's still the king. And people will give them or her, you know, information that they want them to hear, and sometimes it's not what they need to hear.
Ray, kind of tell me, what were some of the key roadblocks or challenges or resistance that you faced when you first started to, you know, when you first brought in Ray to begin the process of transforming the organization?
Well, we made a conscious effort to hire based on culture and less on experience. So as we did that, it took a lot of focus on training and education for our employees, ourselves, and there was a lot of focus on that. And I think in the process of focusing on teaching so much, and we had pretty, I think, decent communication skills, but it was refocusing on realizing that they all had different strengths, and we needed to listen to the different strengths and implement some of that into our strategy. And so I think that was one of the biggest things for us. And also I think the programs that Ray brought, at the time, you know, it's hard. There's a balance being saying, hey, I need to do training. I know I need to have this time to meet and train and do these things, but financially sometimes it's tough, especially for a growing company with cash flow. And so what Ray also introduced was some programs that were paid for by government programs that helped us enable some of those types of training.
Interesting. You know, Ray, we've been speaking with Judy and Ray, and you know, I know that our viewers are interested because obviously, you know, your coaching programs work. You know, tell me how you would go about getting started with a client, or how they would go about getting started with you.
Well, the first thing we do is we try to reach out to them and talk about the assessment, because it's the easiest way to be able to get this. As I said before, you know, you can't help somebody if we don't know where they are. And so in both cases, you know, one, we had a very long-term organization, another one, a successful financial organization, but in both cases, there was something broken, and they weren't quite sure exactly what it was, and so this was the easiest way to get in there. The other thing that Ray alluded to is that, you know, I've been able to work closely with some government entities to be able to offset the cost. The hard part is that every CEO pays for what he needs. Sometimes he buys it, other times he pays for it in bad scrap, rework, bad morale, etc. So, you know, the goal here is to be able to offer them an opportunity to get into this as reasonably as possible so they can see the results. So.
Excellent. And speaking of results, both for Judy and for Ray, good-hearted leadership sounds great. You know, employee morale, you know, transformation of the organization, matters of the heart sounds great. Training sounds great. But at the end of the day, you're also running a business. So for people watching, you know, just kind of in 15 seconds, tell me what was one or two of the key things that really made a difference, that really took your business to the next level from a success standpoint.
Well, I think this has probably been said before, but kind of frequent, open, honest communication.
Okay.
really made a huge difference, as well as the training. I really appreciated all that Ray brought to the table. He knows his stuff, and the training programs available are awesome.
Excellent, excellent. And Ray?
Well, I think the assessment tools, we brought on first who the right people we thought, then kind of the what after. I think the assessment tools helped us understand where we should be placing them and using them to their greatest strengths and listening to them. And for us in our industry, most of our competitors are on the downcline where we've grown by about 100% a year for the last few years.
Wow,
so
excellent.
It's been great for us.
That's results. And then Ray, we're just about to wrap up. Any final comments for individuals that may be interested in seeking business coaching?
Yeah, no, we have some specials that are directly related to the show, and we still have some things that are available that are subsidized. We are very good at being able to get money from the state, and we have another entity. So, you know, I encourage people to call us and find out what those things are. But most importantly, this will transform the organization and improve their results, and that's the most important thing for a business. But you can't do that without people who are engaged and willing to work at it. So.
Amen.
Excellent. You know, Judy, Ray, and Ray, I want to thank you very much for your time. It's been a very informative discussion, and it sounds like that the employees of your organizations are really benefiting from your work with Ray and his assessment tools and his programs. At the end of the day, you know, happy employees and engaged employees really make a difference, and it sounds like that's what's happening in your organizations thanks to Ray's help. So thank you all very much. And for 30 years, Ray and ABC have been helping executives and small business owners free up 1/3 of their time by working harder for 90 days so they can get the benefit of working smarter for a lifetime. If you would like to learn more about the products and services that Anderson Business Coaching offers, please call 951-634-6714 or visit andersonbusinesscoaching.com. Thank you for watching SoCal CEO. I'm Marr Brown.
The following presentation was made possible by the Alltech Media Group, a Southern California multimedia company providing exponential branding and marketing services to all their clients. The Alltech Media Group understands the value of the 3W strategy, providing their clients proven, trackable results. Let us make it easy for you to grow your business. Visit alltechmedia.com.